Hello, my name is Chuckway Honest Johnson, and this is my Supreme Court case project for my American government class. If I keep looking over here, it's because I typed everything out. So, the first case I'm going to be talking about is Plessy versus Ferguson, and in this 1896 Supreme Court case, the court ruled that segregation was constitutional under the separate but equal doctrine. And this case stemmed from an incident in 1892 when an African American train passenger by the name of Homer Plessy refused to sit in the car designated for black people. The implications of this case were that Jim Crow was upheld, and this case became the legal basis for racial segregation in the US for the next 50 years. I didn't see any future cases where it was cited, but I do know that this court decision was overturned by Brown versus the Board of Education in May of 1954. The next case I'm going to be presenting is Korematsu versus the United States. This case stemmed from an incident where a Japanese American man by the name of Fred Korematsu refused to leave his home in San Leandro, California. He was duly convicted, he appealed, and his case reached the Supreme Court in 1944. The Supreme Court ruled that the wartime internment of Japanese Americans was constitutional because there was no way to distinguish those that were supporters of the United States versus not, and they felt like if they didn't put everyone in internment camps, that they'd be putting the United States at risk. The implications of this case were that the internment camps continued to be legal, and the case had a great legal impact because it was the first time the court created a separate standard of review for a law utilizing a suspect classification, stating the laws which discriminate based on race are immediately suspect and must be subjected to the most rigid scrutiny. Also, more recently, this decision was overturned in 2018. Other cases that were impacted was Trump versus Hawaii, because Chief Justice John Roberts repudiated the Korematsu decision in his majority opinion in the 2018 case, Trump versus Hawaii. The third case I'm going to be talking about is Brown versus the Board of Education. In this case, the Supreme Court ruled that racial segregation of public schools was unconstitutional, which overruled the separate but equal principle of Plessy versus Ferguson, as I said earlier. The court reasoned that racial segregation in public schools instilled a sense of inferiority that was detrimental to the education and personal growth of African American children. This case stemmed from an incident when Linda Brown, an African American girl, wasn't allowed to attend a less crowded white school that was only a few blocks away from her home in Topeka, Kansas. And Brown v. the Board of Education was actually made up of 5 cases in between May 17th, 1954, and um, May 31st, 1955. This case had several implications. Mainly that doing away with segregation in public schools provided a major catalyst for the civil rights movement, making possible advances in desegregating housing, public accommodations, and institutions of higher education. And it also helped secure the rights of students with disabilities to receive a free public education as well. I didn't see specific names, but I did find that the cases were a precedent for similar cases filed across the US, and in the few years following the decision, there were 46 similar cases filed in 28 states as a result of this case. Case number 4 is Mapp versus Ohio. And what happened here is on June 19th, 1961, the Supreme Court ruled that evidence seized unlawfully and without a search warrant could not be used in criminal prosecutions in state courts. And it stemmed from an incident in Cleveland, Ohio, when officers forced their way into Dalry Mapp's house without a proper search warrant because they believed her to be housing someone that was suspected of a bombing. And the effect of this case is that the Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable search and seizures was strengthened. Oh, and this decision overruled Wolf versus Colorado, which maintained that illegally obtained evidence did not have to be excluded from trials in all cases. And the last case I'm going to be presenting is Dred Scott versus Sanford. And in this ruling, the court basically concluded that since slaves were not considered U.S. citizens, that they shouldn't expect to be protected under the Constitution. And they wouldn't be protected under the courts. This was kicked off in 1846. After laboring and saving for years, the Scots sought to buy their freedom from Sanford, who refused. Dred Scott then sued Sanford in a state court, arguing that he was legally free because he and his family lived in a territory where slavery was banned. The implications of this was the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling in the Dred case. Scott struck down the Missouri Compromise as unconstitutional, maintaining that Congress did not have the power to forbid slavery in the territories. Other cases that were impacted, I didn't see a case that this was directly impacted by, but I did find that it was overturned by the 13th and 14th Amendments to the Constitution. And that it was my Supreme Court case project. Thank you for watching.